Good evening, everyone, and welcome. My name is Leona, and on behalf of everyone at Better Red Than Dead, we are so excited to see you on Zoom tonight to celebrate Ronni Kahn's new memoir, A Repurposed Life. Please note that tonight's event is being recorded, so if you would not like to be filmed, please turn off your camera settings. Before we begin the proceedings, I would like to acknowledge and pay respect to the traditional owners of the lands on which we meet. These will be different depending on where you're zooming in from. For me, it is the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. It is upon their ancestral lands that Better Red Than Dead is built. We pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and acknowledge that this always was and always will be Aboriginal land. Now, to introduce tonight's guests. As the owner of a successful events company, throwing away huge volumes of leftover food at the end of the day came with the territory. But when Ronni Kahn hit midlife, she found herself no longer able to turn a blind eye to her food waste problem. Hand delivering the untouched food to homeless shelters around Sydney became her renegade solution. Little did she know that fixing her small problem at work would lead her to unlock a hidden purpose at the very core of her inner life. Now founder and CEO of the food rescue organisation Oz Harvest, Ronni leads hundreds of staff and thousands of volunteers with the goal to nourish Australia. Ronni is a passionate advocate and activist, renowned for disrupting the food waste landscape in Australia. She serves in an advisory capacity to government, is an instrumental leader in changing federal laws to improve social justice and environmental policies, and appears regularly in national media in her mission to fight food waste. She is supported by some of the world's finest chefs, is an officer of the Order of Australia, and was named Australian Local Hero of the Year. Her journey is the subject of a feature film, Food Fighter, and tonight we are here to celebrate her recently published memoir, A Repurposed Life. Damon is a renowned Australian television and film actor who released his first documentary feature, That Sugar Film, in 2015. The film became the highest grossing Australian documentary of all time and won the 2015 ACTA Award for Best Documentary, along with many other accolades. That Sugar Book, the film tie-in, was published in more than 20 countries and 8 languages. The follow-up book, That Sugar Guide, also became a bestseller. In 2019, Damon released his second feature documentary, 2040, which imagines how our future would look if all the best environmental solutions that already exist were implemented right now. The accompanying book, 2040, A Handbook for the Regeneration, provides practical wisdom and 50 recipes to help readers make a difference, one small step at a time. We are absolutely delighted to be able to host two such dynamic change makers tonight. Before we get started, please note that there will be a Q&A session towards the end of tonight's event. You could type any questions that you may have for Ronni and Damon into the group chat and they'll answer them via video once the time comes. Without further ado, here's Damon to introduce Ronni.
Oh, I wasn't aware that I was introducing Ronni, but I will.
I think I've been introduced.
Hi, Ronni. Well, everyone, you probably know Ronni, that's why you're here. There's not much to be said, really. Absolute dynamo, has instigated enormous change in this country and other countries, and we should be very proud to call her an Australian. I just said to her that I haven't read her book completely, but I have flipped through a lot of it, and it's a wonderful read, and she has an incredible story to tell, so it's a great honour for me to be here and to be having a conversation, Ronni. So thank you for having me, and congratulations on being in such a spectacularly well wallpapered room compared to me as well. It's a beautiful setting.
Thank you. It's just such an honor and such a privilege and such a treat to be here. I mean, it's a very auspicious day, actually, for us to be doing this. And I'm very grateful that we have people who've joined us. But I do think that today of all days, when so much is at stake in the world today, it's interesting to talk about my book, which I wrote pre-COVID, but I think really couldn't have actually come out at a better time, I think.
And how have you spent today? I mean, I guess we can't move too much more forward without addressing what is an enormous day for the planet, really, for our environment, I guess. How have you tuned into what's been happening in the US today?
Well, I've spent the first half of my day was normal meetings, just but each one was prefaced with, oh my God, you know, I wish we had the power to vote and we wish that we had the power to switch off some votes. And then, yeah, today was, I was invited to a lunch, and Gourmet Traveller normally honors the industry at this time of the year. And they actually did a beautiful thing. They chose not to, obviously, it's been such a challenging year, that they chose just to acknowledge those beautiful industry leaders who've been doing interesting things and things to value other people. So, for example, Neil Perry started a charity to deliver food, and they acknowledged that we've got a little new business that I rolled out in May that was to help the hospitality industry, got chefs to cook. So and we hand deliver meals on a Monday. You can order chefs' beautiful meals on a Monday as a money-making thing for us Harvest. So it's been a beautiful day, whilst this is in the background.
Yeah, I mean, have you spent much time in the US in terms of, you know, your work or looking at other sort of examples of food waste? I know San Francisco's got a pretty extraordinary model there, but have you done any other investigating there?
Yeah, so my sister lives in LA, and when I decided to start Oz Harvest, it wasn't called Oz Harvest then. And this is chronicled in the book. I actually, by chance, come across an organization that's doing exactly what I planned to do in Australia. So I flew there to visit and understand it, and took that as my model. Obviously, I changed it and completely fitted it for Australia and redesigned it, but it was my track record. When I started Oz Harvest, I could say, it's being done, it's okay, we can create this.
So, I mean, I'm not sure exactly what format you want to run with tonight. More of a conversation feels like a good thing to do, but I guess I would love to just hear, I guess that I was reading in your book that sort of that moment that everything really changed for you, that particular event that you organised and sort of noticed how much food was being thrown out. Can you just talk through that period of your life there and what had been going on before that moment, and then how dramatically it did change?
Yeah. So I think it's interesting, and I'll talk about that in the context of even calling the book A Repurposed Life, because I think all of us, and certainly for me, we've all got purpose. You know, for me, prior to repurposing my life, I wanted to make money. I have kids. I wanted them to have the best they could. All of those things were my purpose. I had a business, and that business was an event business. And I was a boutique event owner, sole proprietor, and I was putting on extraordinary events. And that was my purpose, to give my clients the best experience and to deliver the best events, until I came across this problem. And at all of my events, food was going to waste. It just was accumulative. It was going to waste, and there wasn't a lot I could do with it. I always chose very unique and unusual spaces for my events, even then, 30 years ago. And so it wasn't like we were just in a hotel where it was easy to think about redistributing. Anyway, it just was so far from our minds. But one night, I did an event for 1,000 people, and it was exquisite. I made it look like a Roman banquet. There were stalls, there were piles of fresh fruit, wheels of parmesan, kegs of beer, and barrels of wine. And it was going to be an event that would last the night, and I had masses of stalls and food to last the night. But my guests came in, and they went straight for the kegs and the barrels, and within a very short while they were pissed. And all of these magnificent stalls of food were not touched. And it was just unconscionable to think about throwing away that food. And so I piled what I could into my vehicle and all our vans and took that vehicle to an agency late at night. And it was like, wow, I could do this, you know? And that really shifted my thinking. But I was really only galvanized into action on a visit to South Africa, which really made me say, because then I started rogue rescuing. I would just rescue and drop it off here or drop it. I didn't hardly even know where to drop it off to. It wasn't like anybody else was doing this that I could ask. It wasn't like there was a list of agencies. There wasn't even a database that I could call council. And anyway, I didn't want to alert anyone. I just thought, hey, this is cool. There's this food. So that really led me to seeing the bigger picture. And in a way, it reshaped my life because I knew that I couldn't let that food go to waste again. At that point, Damon, I didn't even understand that sending it to landfill was bad. It was more, all I could think of was good food should feed people.
And would you say, as a personality trait of who you were at that point, did something shift around, I guess, a selfish, more self-centered way of operating? Did this discovery start to make you view the world a little bit differently or feel a bit more altruistic? Or what happened there? And was there any shift that allowed you to suddenly want to pursue this path and move away from the, that self-serving world that we all can get stuck in right now? Can you maybe talk about a transition there?
Absolutely. I mean, until then, my events were, making them the most beautiful, the most extraordinary. And after that, it was this dilemma of sharing with my clients that we were going to produce this beautiful food for them, but then saying, but how would they feel if I made sure that that food would go to waste, would not go to waste, would go and feed people? And absolutely, it fundamentally changed my life. I'd volunteered in the past, I'd done things in the past, but I'd never had the joy of saying, here's beautiful food to people, and seeing what it meant to them, the difference it meant to them, and for me, what little effort it actually took. And it did take effort. It was confronting. It was late at night. I mean, it wasn't being done. I'm underplaying that a little bit, but the point is seeing the effect fundamentally. That's totally shifted everything for me.
And I'm imagining this is why you probably wrote the book, is that, do you think not enough people actually understand the magic that happens then when you do make that shift and start to give and contribute in some way and find that purpose? Just the ripple effects that come with that on your own life, let alone the other people you're benefiting, that sort of glow you get yourself. Can you maybe talk about that?
Well, I definitely think that's the interesting thing. You start off thinking, oh, I'll do something good for somebody. But the personal benefit becomes way bigger because there's such joy in being able to share and give and see how it's received. It becomes, honestly, no money I've ever earned feels as good as what I've done in House Harvest. No money. And there have been times when I had done enormous events with 6 zeros, but nothing I've ever done feels as good as what I've done once I started doing House Harvest full time. But what's interesting, because you touched on why did I write the book? So I guess I've been asked to write a book right really from early on in House Harvest, and I just always thought, what have I got to say and why would I write a book? I think I reached a point, I get so much validation for the work that I do. And that's extraordinary. And excuse, that's my 6-week-old baby in the background. If somebody can hear, she wants to have her say too. And so I wanted people to understand that they don't have to do what I've done. I wanted people to understand that I stumbled in a way into this, and that instead of looking at me or at anybody else, because I've been mentoring people for years and they all come in and in a way they sort of have said, I want to do what you do, or I want to feel what you feel. And I guess the most important thing for me about the book was to show that I'm not saying anybody could do what I've done, because I chose to do what I've done. But all we have to do is really, every one of us has got a story. And what I think we all need to do is look in the mirror and not look sideways and not look here, not look there and say, oh my God, I want to be that and I want to be like that. We want everybody to be who they are and to find the joy that they find. And you don't have to start a charity. You just have to start by being kind to yourself, to the people around you, and to our planet. And that is so joyful. And that I happen to be blessed to have found this problem that I chose to fix. But so many times we all say, oh, this drives me nuts. This is so irritating. Why doesn't somebody fix it? In my case, I chose to fix it. In your case, you chose to write about it and to film it and document it. And the truth is, we all can find something, and it doesn't have to be grandiose, and it doesn't have to be special. And I'm not saying mine is special, but I do know that I've created something that has made a big difference.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point I reckon to address next, is that sometimes, I mean, our culture can glorify these things, and rightly so. You know, you've done an incredible job, but I think sometimes people can feel inadequate around that, or that, you know, oh, that's what Ronni does, I could never do that. So maybe can you talk about the hardships, the barriers you faced, even personally, your own courage you had to find, or those moments where you felt like, oh, this is all too bloody hard, and what am I doing? Am I wasting my time? All that self-doubt that anyone has that's trying to contribute in some way. Can you maybe just talk about that period and how you dealt with that?
You know, until I started Oz Harvest was when I had all those doubts about who I was and what I was. Funnily enough, when I realized that there was food that I was creating and I could give it to somebody in need, you know, in my naivety, I think it's either naivety or stupidity, never occurred to me that Oz Harvest couldn't succeed. So interestingly, I think in a way you get driven when you see the results of something you're doing that is positive. But of course there were challenges along the way. And of course there were things that I just chose not to make obstacles. But I so fervently knew that good food should be feeding people and shouldn't be going to waste, that I just didn't allow those things to get me down. It's how I got to that place along the way, I guess, which was really why I wrote my book, because I certainly wasn't the obvious candidate to be this person that started Oz Harvest. And I guess that's the point that I want to make. You know, I was this shy little mouse in a corner. Now, I know that's hard to believe.
I don't believe you. That's a lie, but thank you. Yeah.
No, it's true. It's true. It's once I found what it was that lit me up and that gave me the power. If you'd have told me that I would be speaking on television, that I would be talking to thousands of people, I would have said, no way, in my previous life. But when there's something so important to share and say, you find courage that you didn't even know was there. And I'm sure you, in a way, can identify with that.
I remember doing, when I was an actor, I remember sometimes you have to go through these press tours where you have to go and, you know, talk to a journalist about the film. And it was always so painful if you didn't connect with the story you're telling. And you could see the look in the journalist's eyes too. They'd be saying, so, can you tell us about your character? And you're both playing this game of pretending that it's serious and that you're enjoying your jobs, but it was actually, just excruciating sometimes. And then I remember launching the Sugar film in the US, and I did this Dr. Oz show in America, and he was going out to 20 million people. And I remember sitting with him in this chair, and all these cameras were about to turn on me, and all the women were stomping their feet because there was some giveaway in the crowd. Classic American show. And I remember actually just catching myself thinking, I'm not even nervous here, because I was so connected to what I was about to say.
Exactly.
Nothing me about it. It transcended my own ego and my own fears and insecurities. It was like, no, this is just about getting the message out. So all that stuff dropped away, which was a profound moment.
And
that's where I had my epiphany.
And that's exactly the point. It's like it's not ego, it's not anything. I'm just still in awe that I am the person that's been blessed to do this. And it gives you an extraordinary amount of courage and ability to just share a message. I mean, shit, I wrote a book that is so naked and raw. And how did I do that? I don't know. but it just is, if I was going to do this, it had to be as honest and real, because there's really no way to hide.
Yeah. What about this moment that we find ourselves in right now? Obviously this year's been an extraordinary year. We know everything that's going on systemically with the planet. I think your story is such an inspiring one of someone who's found their agency and is contributing at a time where we need people to find their agency and contribute. So what learnings do you have to share from that in terms of your knowledge and how to apply it for people in this moment that might be thinking, you know what, I'm not loving the job I do. I'm feeling a bit, I'm not doing enough to contribute globally. There's so many issues. Is there any particular advice, something you can share around that?
Definitely. So first of all, I do think that, interestingly, the timing of my book, because I certainly wrote it, there was no COVID, and it came out, we knew COVID had started, we knew there'd be no launches, there'd be no book fairs, there'd be no way to push this book. And yet the message within this book is actually so timely, because again and again, I've heard through these last 6-8 months how people are re-examining their lives. And I think it's actually the opportunity that's come out of this crisis, is that ability to say, okay, we never thought this could ever happen to us, that the world would stop, that our country would close down, that everything we knew would change. And so prior to this happening, I would say to people, if you don't love your work, there is only one life we have that we know of. Now, there might be many, many other lives that we're not aware of yet, or we will become aware of. But in this reality and in this life, this is the only one we've got and the only chance we've got. And so either look at the work that you do and say, how could I be the change maker within this work? How could I be the one? In my book, I quote this author, Robin Sharma, that honestly I once came across and he talks about, we are all leaders without titles, with or without a title. So when you're in your work, and you might not be the CEO, or you might be the CEO. If you're the CEO, you have the power to bring absolutely purpose and meaning front and foremost to the workplace. We need to bring our whole selves to work. We need to be who we are meant to be. And sometimes we're not sure who that is. So you can try and say, how does it feel if I went to work today and I took a spare cup of coffee, or to the person who sits next to me who wasn't expecting it? It's tiny little ripples of goodness that we can do. Now we're not necessarily working in an office space. So what could I do for somebody that might just surprise them? It's thinking about others. It's doing so I believe that within a workspace, if you feel you're stuck there, if you feel you've got to earn that money for that mortgage, then be the best you can be in that role. Or start finding what it is that you love and spending more time doing that, because often that's where the secret lies. That's where the bliss lies.
Beautiful. Yeah, I mean, it does feel like we're being presented with an opportunity in this moment, isn't it? And I sometimes feel incredibly fortunate to be around at this time. I know it can sound strange, but there's just an opportunity to fundamentally shift so many aspects of how we live and interact with all living systems that, if we can see it as that and not see it as a moment of, oh, I've got to give up things and sacrifice and fear, but actually, like any upheaval in your life is a chance to change and do things better.
Yeah.
The fact that we as a human race get that opportunity to do that collectively in this moment is an extraordinary challenge, but it is an opportunity. And I think that's what you found, is that all these jobs are waiting for us. Nature is just quietly sitting there waiting to be regenerated. It's still here. When you humans get out the bloody way, I'll spring back really quickly. I've showed you that.
Exactly.
And I've just calmly and quietly been waiting here. And what I'll offer is a life of meaning and purpose as fundamentally change the whole system. What a great opportunity. But unfortunately, I think we are a bit caught at the moment, aren't we? We're trapped in this sort of limbic hijack of trying to be right and proving who's right online, and we get caught up in these ridiculous discussions that really aren't serving us, aren't serving the planet. And unless we address that, democracy is going to unravel and we're in serious trouble. So I think all the more reason to be promoting stories like yours.
Well, I think the simplicity of it is we don't have to be the leader of the biggest corporation. We don't have to start a charity. Again, I'm so fortunate that when I found a problem, there wasn't a solution, and I chose to find a solution that has been an incredible solution. I mean, that's just me stumbling into that. But each and every one of us can find a way to make a difference to our family, to the little surroundings. And it's not that it costs money to do that. And the shift is in our minds. The shift's in our ability to say, what can I do for the world? Not what does the world do for me? And therein lies the biggest shift. Yeah.
So for you, when was I remember when I first met Paul Hawken, who did Project Drawdown, and he sort of had revealed that food waste was their number 3 solution. So for people that don't know, they mapped and measured the 100 most substantive solutions to reversing global warming and found that food waste was actually number 3. And interestingly, it was around the energy used to distribute our food, to produce our food, the amount to ship it around the world. The amount that we're wasting was using enormous amounts of emissions. They weren't even factoring in the methane emissions that come from food waste going to landfill. So at what point did you discover that, yes, you knew it was important because this food shouldn't be wasted? When did you learn about the environmental impacts of what your work was doing? And then did that shift?
Fundamentally. So probably about 6 months in, I started thinking, I suddenly realized that not only was I tackling a social problem, I started reading and thinking and realized that actually we have an environmental solution here too. I mean, and that's really, so I never started Oz Harvest to be the biggest food rescue organization in the world. I started it to put us, I thought I'd just rescue food until I'd solved the problem, and then I'd go back to doing what I did. But clearly, I underestimated the size of the problem, which is when I started adding education elements to Oz Harvest. It wasn't enough just to rescue food. We actually have to shift behavior. And so that's when, I started adding this whole education piece, how to shift how vulnerable people eat, how to eat sustainably, and how to educate And so we've got, programs that go into schools and programs, we're working on a really big intervention program on fighting food waste, working with universities and academics to really understand. So once I understood the scale of the problem, that's when, again, everything shifted for me. Yeah.
And did you find it was easy to get people on board once? Because I imagine people wouldn't have been that aware of food waste as a problem in the early 2000s when you started. How's that changed? The awareness obviously is enormous in the public, but even in the sort of the private sector or in that philanthropic community of you getting the money early on, how did that all work? How did that momentum play out?
Yeah, the beautiful part is that every single person really knows they shouldn't waste food. I didn't actually have to educate your mother, somebody in your life, your grandparents, somebody at some point said to you, eat your food because there's someone starving somewhere. I'm sure out of the people who are listening, there are people nodding because they would have heard that at some point in their lives. So the exciting part was, it was like I tapped into a universal truth. The part nobody connected with then was this notion that if it went to waste, it also was bad for the environment. So that took much more time and is still taking time. I mean, I was a lone voice then, and I think that's really why I'm heralded as a, innovator or whatever, because nobody was talking about it then. But once we started realizing, and once I started investigating, everything around our message shifted. That's when we changed to our purpose is to nourish our country, because that gave me license to not only feed people, but also nourish our soul and our minds. And it gave me a much broader platform to work with. And that happened quite soon after I'd started.
And where are we at now as a country? I mean, in terms of our food waste, we sort of hear a lot about recycling in terms of materials and single-use plastics, but where do we sit as a country in terms of those statistics, and how are we doing compared to how we were doing 10 years ago?
So what's extraordinary, that COVID has been incredibly helpful to us. During this time that we've been home, we suddenly started valuing food again. We had to cook our own food. People were making bread. I mean, you see thousands of photos of the beautiful creations that people were making. There was less waste and definitely more awareness around the value of food in the last 6 months. So that is another positive that has come out of this pandemic. But ultimately, a third of all food still goes to waste. In Australia, we waste the real figure, the figure that is quoted is $20 billion. I can tell you it's way more than that per year. And half of that food comes from households. So we've got a huge amount of work still to do to shift and change behavior. Changing behavior is one of the toughest things to do, which is why we're working with academics and behavioral scientists to try and help us find the low-hanging fruit, the easy things that we can do, because we're still wasting billions of dollars of food every year.
There does seem to be a slight shift with some councils I know who are at least looking at sort of picking up, using the waste, picking it up, turning it into compost, using it as energy sources. I know where I live, they're thinking about turning it into electricity. So are you hearing more of that, particularly in the last
Absolutely.
few years, as technology comes into play?
Definitely. I mean, there's much more talk about it. There's much more awareness. Again, the same way as the leaders of our, when people shout at me and say, but the supermarkets, well, supermarkets put in their stores what we sell, what we want to buy. Yeah. Supermarkets, business is geared to how we behave. And we are those people. We, the same leaders that run those, as citizens, we have enormous power. And in a way, that's also what I wanted to show with my book. We have the ability. We have power in our voices and in our actions. I mean, today is going to be this either hopeful example or a frightful example of the power that we have to endorse you know, some morals. I think our leadership is global leadership is morally a little bankrupt, and you know, it's a tough place to be, and in a way, again, I think if people, I would hope that if people read my book and decided to start doing good, and people do good, they absolutely do, but if it reinforces actions, then that's a good thing, because again, it's the ripple effect of how we can make a difference.
Right. Ronnie, if you're up for it, I might open this up for discussions. If anyone wants to ask a question of Ronnie or myself, fire away. There's an interesting comment that's coming here already from Fiend. Sorry if I said phone or Fiend. Sorry if I've said that wrong. It's an interesting point. It's probably worth a discussion. It's around, if, you know, to the unemployed or underemployed, a life of meaning, is it only relevant if you have enough to pay the rent, feed yourself? Is it the version of that you're responsible for the way you move through this life? I mean, that's a really interesting point. I'd love to discuss that.
Yeah, it's a fascinating point. So to that person, I do want to just share that I worked for the first 7 years full-time in my business while I started Oz Harvest, because I could never afford not to work. So just so it's not, you know, I'm privileged because I've made work, I've been able to work, and I've made the best of the work that I've ever done. But of course, talking about somebody who's unemployed and who's either lost their job now or has never had a job, hey, the reason I do what I do is because I recognize that there are people who've fallen through the cracks. There are people who need food. There are people who've not been given an opportunity. So I think this isn't about being transcendental. It's about being responsible, and it's about taking action. And I have some extraordinary stories of the people that we service who have found the ability to do more and to give back in their way. So, you know, I don't think that a life of meaning, if you look at people who've been through incredible hardships, from the Holocaust to terrible situations in refugee camps, meaning is the thing that gets you through. Meaning isn't about just having a beautiful house. Meaning is about finding purpose. And that is not relegated only to people who are either wealthy or privileged. Not at all. This is where we find meaning in small things. That's the whole point.
Yeah. Reminds me of the Viktor Frankl book too.
Absolutely. Viktor Frankl, Esther Eger.
Yeah.
These
even if you're stuck in a concentration camp, these, you know, people were finding some kind of meaning in their life to get them through. And
exactly. And it's about choice. We have it, you know, we still have a choice as to how we find meaning and how we don't. So
yeah, and I can only attest to that from my own experience. Was I was in my early 30s and working at a restaurant in Los Angeles, and completely miserable and broke, and living in a tiny shitty apartment, and broke up with my girlfriend and felt very sorry for myself, and wailed on the steps at 3 a.m. thinking, gosh, you know, this can't be all there is to life. It's just, this is not it. And began my own sort of journey of going, right, I've got to get the focus off myself here, because I was just wallowing, and how can I make a difference? How can I help people? And then slowly one thing led to another, and you meet someone else, and suddenly this new path starts to open up. And I still didn't have any money, but then I just started feeling good about myself and enjoying my life, because I was trying to give in some capacity. And then I reached a point where maybe it was a tipping point, but then things did start to change, and then opportunities came that weren't there before. So I often talk about that, and it's not going to apply to everyone, but I went through that, and I very much thought this was it. My life was going to be just being this waiter for the rest of my life. And I thought, no, I don't want that. I've got too much to offer. I want to help in some way, even if it gives me nothing back. I want to try and contribute in some way. So I don't necessarily think, I mean, obviously there are certain circumstances where people are very under hardship, but for the majority of us, we can make a choice if we want to.
You know, it's interesting, I was on a call, actually one of the things that I did today was on a call with a bunch of volunteers who we have chapters in regional and remote Australia where volunteers come together and do the work for us, with us. We teach them, we train them, and they wear our Harvest t-shirts, and they're just the most beautiful people. And one of the people on volunteering was a guy. He said, I just need you to know, I've got 6 children, I lost my job, I was the most down and out I could possibly be. And, you know, I found something, I saw you, I did this, I did that, I'm back now, I've got a job, and I've come to volunteer because I know what it's like, and I've been there, and, you know, so he found that the meaning for him was in being able to do something for others, even when things were really tough. So I think it does take resilience, and it does take a huge amount of energy, but I think when we look inside, that's where it is. It's not outside.
Mm-hmm. So I'll finish with a couple of questions, Ronni. First one I want to ask you is, what's something that people might not be aware of? What's something that if I got to know you better, what would I be surprised to learn about? You know, we all have this sort of public persona, and we share what we want to share in our books and whatnot, but is there anything that, you know, if we spent a whole day together, by the end of that day, you'd say, wow, okay, I didn't know that about Ronni. What's something you want to divulge to these people tonight?
Well, after having just been raw and naked in my book, I think that, I mean, you know, I'm pretty vulnerable in the book. But I think, honestly, the truth is, when you and I started talking before, and I said, seriously, Damon, I'm actually shy. And if you put me, you know, there's nothing I actually hate worse than going to a social encounter. Even today, where I don't know people look at me and just think that I am this, you know, yeah, I'll just go out and I would rather sit in the corner and hope that somebody would come and talk to me, because that kind of an engagement is just still very hard for me. So I don't think you would have known that.
Thank you. That's a lovely thing to share. We need vulnerability, we need authenticity, and thank you for being a leader in that, particularly in that moment. And finally, because obviously I'm quite obsessed with the future and imaginations and what a better world we could create, I wanted to get a sense of you of what your vision for the future is in terms of food waste, and what does a really efficient looking system look like in 10, 15, 20 years from now, when we have turned things around. Just describe what it's like to live in Australia and how we deal with our food and restaurants. How does it all look?
Well, currently we've got 6 million people. 1 million have been added in the last 8 months. New cohort who've never needed food. So we currently have 6 million people in Australia who at some point in the year, at some point, need support, food relief. So if I could paint a new picture of what an Australia could look like, it's that hunger and homelessness are eradicated. I mean, the two fundamental things are a roof over your head and food in your belly. So, you know, if I could prevail on our leaders to invest in taking people off the streets, helping us upskill, helping us create a much more equitable life. So that's what I'm gunning for. Mm-hmm. The fact that I've put ourselves out of business, that the food system is not broken, that farmers get paid, that we pay for the value of food, that we understand that we all value food. our food actually, I know I get, it is too cheap. It costs water, fuel, energy, labor to produce exquisite food. And we don't want to pay for it. So we have to pay a fair price for the food we eat. We have to value farmers. We have to buy local. We have to invest in our country. We, not sell off our country. Grow what we need and eat what we grow, That's what I'd love to see, and I'd love us to not get rid of koala sanctuaries and what can I say? We need our leaders to be dipped in green and come out.
Yeah, we need our leaders to lead, don't we? There is a question from Chelsea Little. She says, love you, Ronni. Thanks for your vulnerability. Do you think the government is on track to halving Australia's food waste by 2030?
So given that our government committed to halving food waste by 2030 because I banged on their door and told them that they had to, look, I've been on the National Food Waste Strategy Committee. We've just had one of our ministers, Minister Evan, invest in a voluntary agreement, because until we get industry engaged and until we get business engaged and until we get more education in schools. So the short answer is I'm going to do my absolute damnedest. I don't know that we're going to make it. The UK started 10 years before us, and they're not sure that, it's a UN SDG goal. I think we could attain it if we all got on board. Is our government leading strongly enough? No. But, we just have to make the biggest noise. But it's a great question. I totally believe it's doable, but each and every one of us has to play our part.
Is there, when you say that, what can we do to help you more? I mean, is it about storytelling? Is it amplifying? Is it
absolutely.
Is it cleaning our own plates? Is it all of that? Or what would be the best help?
Well, the best and the low-hanging fruit is us. We throw away 1 in 5 shopping bags that we buy. We're wasting $4,000 a year, households, on food waste. So yes, if we composted, if we didn't waste, if we used our leftovers, if we ate our leftovers, if we bought less, if we bought what we need, if we stored our food properly, if we looked before we went shopping, if we bought what we needed, and we bought less and we used it all up, it would go a big way to making a difference. Yeah. And so it does need storytelling, and it needs us to be willing to not go at midnight and buy a loaf of bread or get upset if there's no bread, because all the time we want everything available 24/7. We overconsume. And it means the stores have to cater to our needs.
Yeah. And I imagine it's quite a wicked problem in that sense, isn't it? Because there is no easy policy fix, or there's no incentive that the government can offer. It's you don't want to impose on people's choice.
We could change labelling. We've got to change the labelling. We've got to not want to buy milk that will last a week and throw it away on a random date because it's written on a box. We need to trust our own selves and value food and not want to waste it.
I remember actually researching 2040, there was a solution around a particular label that actually had a colour code that reacted to the food inside to tell it when it was about to go off. Do you know about that?
Yeah, we're looking at all the technologies around that. It's just getting manufacturers and producers to shift.
That's where we need the help. Yeah.
Yeah.
Terrific. Well, Ronni, I think that's it, really. I mean, thank you so much for everything you've done, for the book, for your vulnerability tonight, for your inspiration. Congratulations. I hope the book goes very, very well. Is there anything else final message you want for people, or any way that they or myself or anyone can support you further?
Yeah, look, I do think that living a purposeful, meaningful life means we're much kinder, we're much more thoughtful, we're much more caring, whether it's on a big scale or a low scale. So somebody sent me a message yesterday who'd read the book. I didn't know them, and just said, what I've got out of this book, that is, if a shy or person who didn't ever think they had something to offer read your book, they would be empowered to know that they did. And so I guess I just want to thank Better Read Than Dead for allowing us to have this conversation and to share my book. Because, yeah, I thought on the one hand I have to either go and hide under a rock for the next few years while the book is out, or I have to embrace it. And since it's out there, I'm choosing to embrace it. And I hope that people will read it and love it and learn something from it and benefit from it.
Well, I can speak for Better Ed and say that certainly people over here have been embracing it. And just a reminder that it is on our beautiful shelves, it's on our website, and please read this book. It's so important and it's so wonderful. And thank you so much to Damon and Ronni for today, and for the book, and for everything that both of you do, because it means a lot. It's honestly, it's everything. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity. And let's hope we wake up tomorrow morning and we are in a position to hope that the world is less divided.
Thanks,
Right.
Ronni. Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you so much, everyone.
Thanks so much. Cheers. Bye.